In November of 2025, 51 babies across 19 American states ended up in hospital beds with the same rare, terrifying condition. Tiny bodies going limp, struggling to breathe, some unable to swallow. When doctors traced what connected them, the answer wasn't some obscure back alley product. It was a formula sold in Target, in Kroger, in Walmart. A brand that had spent years telling parents it was the cleanest, safest, most premium formula money could buy. That brand is on this list. So are names you'd recognize instantly, names that have sat in American nurseries for generations. Because over the last 4 years, the baby formula industry has been hit by a wave of recalls, federal investigations, whistleblower complaints, and laboratory tests that found things no parent wants to imagine in their child's bottle. We went through the FDA's own recall records, congressional testimony, independent lab results, and court filings. And what we found breaks down into two very different kinds of danger, one that can hurt a baby in a matter of hours, and one that builds up invisibly over months. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which formulas earned a place on the avoid list, and just as importantly, the 3 that were put under the same microscope and came out genuinely clean. Stay with me, because the safest 3 are not the ones you'd expect, and one of the most trusted names in the country didn't make that list. Here's something most parents are never told. Powdered baby formula is not sterile. It cannot be. The manufacturing process can't fully eliminate every microbe, which means the powder itself can carry bacteria. And for a newborn with an immune system that's barely switched on, certain bacteria are a death sentence. That's why formula is one of the most heavily regulated foods in America. Back in 1980, after formulas with dangerously low nutrient levels harmed infants, Congress passed the Infant Formula Act, giving the Food and Drug Administration unusual power over how formula is made, tested, and recalled. On paper, it's a fortress. But here's the tension at the heart of this whole story. That fortress has enormous gaps. To this day, there is no federal limit on how much lead, arsenic, or other heavy metal is legally allowed in infant formula. The core nutrition rules still lean on science from the 1980s. And the entire American supply rests on just 4 companies: Abbott, Reckitt, Nestle, and Perrigo, who together control around 90% of the market. It goes deeper. The government's WIC program, which helps feed roughly half of all American infants, hands a single company an entire state through exclusive contracts. And winning one can lift that company's sales in the state by nearly 3/4 on average. It's efficient. It's also dangerously concentrated. When even one of their factories goes down, the whole country feels it. So when we talk about brands to avoid, we're really asking 2 questions. Which companies had contamination serious enough to pull product off shelves? And which ones, when independent scientists tested what was inside the can, had something to hide? Let's start with the recall that exposed just how fragile the entire system really is. It began quietly with a letter. In October of 2021, a former employee at Abbott's massive formula plant in Sturgis, Michigan, sent federal regulators a 34-page complaint. Inside were allegations that should have set off every alarm in the building: falsified records, lax cleaning, standing water on the floors, and efforts to hide problems from inspectors during an earlier audit. The whistleblower even described a practice of quietly discarding formula made near a contaminated sample, while releasing formula from other production times without extra testing. And then, almost nothing happened. The FDA did not interview that whistleblower until late December, roughly 2 months later. Investigators did not set foot inside the plant until the end of January 2022. The agency's own commissioner later admitted part of the delay came down to something almost absurd: for a crisis involving infants, a failure in the FDA's mailroom. By the time inspectors walked the factory floor, they documented a history of Chronobacter, a rare but vicious bacteria, turning up inside the plant on multiple occasions going back to 2019. On February 17, 2022, Abbott issued a voluntary recall of several powdered formulas, including certain Similac products. Days later, it expanded after the death of an infant. In total, 4 babies had fallen ill, 2 had died. Now, this is where accuracy matters more than drama because genetic testing was never able to definitively match the bacteria in the plant to the bacteria that made those specific babies sick. Abbott holds on to that fact to this day, and it is true. And to be fair, this bacteria is genuinely hard to eliminate. A 2024 study found it living in the household environment of more than a third of American homes tested. But the inspection findings were damning on their own, and the consequences were enormous. That single plant supplied roughly 1 in 5 cans of formula in the United States. When it shut down, the country fell off a cliff. By late May of 2022, the out-of-stock rate for baby formula hit around 70% in parts of the country. Parents were driving across state lines, rationing, watering down bottles, which pediatricians beg you never to do. Abbott and the FDA eventually signed a legal agreement to reopen the plant that May, and the government launched an emergency airlift it called Operation Fly Formula. 1 factory, 1 delayed letter, a nation of parents suddenly unable to feed their babies. And if that sounds like the low point, brace yourself, because the most disturbing case on this list was still 3 years away. For years, a new kind of formula company had been rising, brands built on a promise that the old giants had gotten lazy and dirty, and that they would do it cleaner. Premium ingredients, whole milk, simple labels. One of the most talked about was a brand called By Heart. Then, in November of 2025, babies started arriving at hospitals with botulism, a rare, paralyzing illness almost never associated with powdered formula. Investigators zeroed in on By Heart. What followed was staggering. The company first recalled 2 batches, then, within days, recalled every single product it had ever made going back to March of 2022. The Centers for Disease Control reported 51 infants hospitalized across 19 states. Thankfully, no deaths were reported. And here is the detail that should stop every parent scrolling. This was not By Heart's first problem. The brand had already recalled product in 2022 over contamination concerns and received a warning letter from the FDA in 2023. A former FDA food safety official put it bluntly, writing that 2 major recalls and a warning letter in 3 years is not a good track record, especially for a product meant for the most vulnerable people alive. The lesson is uncomfortable. Clean branding is not the same thing as clean manufacturing. But By Heart was far from alone. The household names had their own recalls. In February of 2023, the maker of Enfamil pulled roughly 145,000 cans of a soy-based formula over Chronobacter concerns. Then that December, it recalled more than 675,000 cans of Nutramigen. And understand who Nutramigen is for, these aren't everyday formulas. They're for babies with severe cow's milk allergies, infants who often can't safely drink anything else. When a recall hits a specialty formula like that, a parent can't just grab a different can off the shelf. And here's the unsettling part, that contamination wasn't caught first by the United States. It was flagged by health authorities in Israel, testing the product as it crossed their border. Even the smaller premium players weren't immune. In May of 2026, the company behind A2 Platinum recalled several batches after tests found a toxin produced by bacteria that can trigger violent vomiting in infants. That one turned out to be part of something bigger. The World Health Organization reported that a contaminated batch of an oil added to formula had triggered recalls in several countries at once. A single tainted ingredient rippling across the globe before anyone noticed. So that's the fast danger, the kind that triggers recalls and lands babies in hospitals. But remember, I told you there were two kinds. The second kind does not announce itself. It just sits in the can. In March of 2025, Consumer Reports published something that rattled a lot of parents. Independent scientists tested 41 powdered formulas for heavy metals and other contaminants. Their finding was that about half the samples contained what they judged to be potentially harmful levels of at least one contaminant. The highest reading of inorganic arsenic showed up in a specialty Abbott product, Elecare, at 19.7 parts per billion. That was nearly double the limit the government sets for drinking water. Another Similac specialty formula was not far behind. The highest lead reading came from an Infamil product. Now, I promised you accuracy, so here is the honest other side. Heavy metals like arsenic and lead are everywhere in the environment, in soil, in water, even in breast milk. There is no proof these trace levels harmed any specific child, and Consumer Reports thresholds are its own health-based benchmarks, not legal limits, because, as we said, the government has not set any. The companies insist their products are safe and meet international standards. But that same testing revealed something powerful. Because while half the formulas raised concerns, the other half showed low or no detectable contaminants, which proves it is entirely possible to make formula without them. The variation is not random. It is a choice. A follow-up round the next year reached the same split, and the testers offered a practical tip. Ready-to-feed liquid formulas, which skip the rice-based ingredients that concentrate arsenic, tended to test cleaner. Then there is what is deliberately added. Go online and you will hear that some American formulas list corn syrup as a top ingredient. That sounds alarming, but let me be precise, because precision matters when it is a baby. Corn syrup solids are not high fructose corn syrup. They are a sugar some infants actually digest more easily. Still, an FDA expert panel noted in 2025 that more than half of American formulas swap out lactose for these glucose sugars, which some studies link to faster weight gain. It is a legitimate concern, just not a poisoning. There's one more group of formulas I need to flag, and it might be the most counterintuitive. For years, American parents have quietly imported European formulas, brands like HIPP, Hawley, and Lebenswert, convinced that Europe's stricter rules make them automatically superior. And it's true, the European Union bans some additives America allows, and has required the healthy fat DHA since 2020. But here's what the marketing doesn't tell you. When you buy those formulas through unofficial importers, they haven't been reviewed by the FDA at all. In August of 2021, a major importer had to recall several of those very brands because they failed to meet basic American requirements for iron content and labeling. A formula being popular in Berlin does not mean it was ever checked for your baby in Boston. Which brings us to the courtroom, and the most contested part of this entire story. Abbott and the maker of Enfamil face hundreds of lawsuits from families who allege that cow's milk formula caused a devastating intestinal disease called NEC in their premature babies. Some juries have returned enormous verdicts, tens, even hundreds of millions of dollars. But I have to be straight with you, because this is where a lot of videos cross a line. These are allegations being fought in court. Several of those verdicts were later overturned, and the FDA, the CDC, and the American Academy of Pediatrics have all pushed back, saying the science points to the absence of breast milk, not a defect in the formula, as the real driver, and that for a premature baby with no other option, this formula is standard, life-saving care. It's a genuine dispute. You deserve both sides, not just the scary one. So after all of that, the recalls, the lab tests, the lawsuits, is there anything a parent can actually trust? There is. And this is the part the fear-driven headlines almost never reach. When those same independent scientists ran their tests, roughly half the formulas came back clean, low or no detectable contaminants. Among the products that consistently landed near the top for purity was Bobby, an American-made organic brand that, notably, has never issued a safety recall. Store brands surprised a lot of people, too. The Kirkland Signature formula sold at Costco repeatedly showed up among the better performers, despite costing a fraction of the premium names. And certain Earth's Best organic products rounded out the safer end of the testing. But I want to be careful here, because I'd rather tell you something true than something comforting. Safe does not mean magic. It means these products, when tested by outsiders, didn't carry the contaminant levels others did and don't carry the recall history others do. That's the strongest signal a parent can act on, not the marketing on the front of the can, but the track record behind it. And remember the cruel irony sitting at the center of this whole investigation. The brand that marketed itself as the cleanest, the most premium, the most trustworthy by heart is the one that ended with babies in hospital beds and every product it ever made pulled from shelves. Meanwhile, a plain warehouse store brand quietly passed the same tests the giants failed. There's one last twist. After everything the Abbott plant put the country through, the deaths, the shortage, the whistleblower, the Department of Justice quietly closed its criminal investigation into the company in June of 2026, choosing not to bring charges. For a lot of parents who lived through that shortage, that ending felt less like justice and more like a shrug. So where does that leave you? Standing in the formula aisle, holding a can, trying to do right by a person who can't yet speak. Here's the honest takeaway. The system is slowly waking up. The FDA has launched its first full review of formula nutrition standards since 1998 and promised more testing for heavy metals. But regulation moves slowly, and your baby drinks tonight, so you become the last line of defense. Before you buy, take 10 seconds to check the FDA's recall list, because that's where the fast, dangerous problems show up first. Favor brands with a clean track record over brands with a clean advertising budget. Never water down formula to stretch it. And when in doubt, the most powerful tool you have isn't a YouTube video. It's a 2-minute conversation with your pediatrician who actually knows your specific child. Because the truth this whole story keeps circling back to is simple. In an industry built on trust, that trust should be earned in a lab and on an inspection report, not on a label. If this helped you look at that can a little differently, subscribe and stick around, because we dig into the products in your home that nobody else is willing to question.